Hello, everybody. This is a continuation of the Sicilian dragon themes and motifs, and this will be concentrating not on the opening but on the middle game. So, the game I had used was John Nunn against Tony Miles from a 1980 game they had played. And just to get to the point we were at the end of the last video, e4, c5, knight f3, d6, d4, takes, knight f6, knight c3, g6, g3, knight c6, knight d, e2, bishop g7, bishop g2, rook b8, a4, a6, castles b5, takes, knight d5, castles, bishop g5, knight d7, queen c1, knight c5, b4, knight e6, bishop h6, knight e to d4, takes, knight takes, king h1, bishop takes, queen takes, knight takes c2, and then rook a to c1, knight d4. Okay, so this is where we reached last time, and just looking at the position here, white's bishop on g2 is influencing e4 and d5, so it's controlling the centre, but perhaps is not yet reached its full potential. The rook on the c-file is on the c-file, it's controlling it, influencing it, so that's quite good. The rook on f1, again, it could be useful if white pushes his f-pawn. Queen on h6 is putting a bit of pressure on the king's side, but again, isn't really doing a whole lot. But the real superstar here is the knight on d5. It's controlling lots of squares in black's half of the board and is probably on the optimal square. If we look at black, the rook on the b file and the f file are just protecting their own pawns. They're not in the most useful position. The queen on d8 is controlling a lot of dark squares but is very defensive. And the bishop hasn't even moved yet. It is controlling some key light squares, but it could be a whole lot better. And again, black's best piece is his knight on d4. So here, John Nunn improved his pieces with rook c7. So infiltrating to the 7th rank. So here, if white can keep the rook there for even a few moves and not allow black to knock it away, then this will force black to be incredibly defensive and get very, very cramped, whereas white's pieces are going to be free to just increase the pressure. So an excellent move by white. And here, knight takes e7 is being threatened, so bishop d7 was played, f4. So instead of doubling on the c-file or playing rook a1 and trying to get it to a7, white is going for a kingside attack. He's planning on playing f5 and maybe even f6 if he can, threatening queen g7 mate. So black plays f5 himself, stopping any further f-pawn advances. So white now plays e5, getting a pawn into black's half. Again, has a cramping influence, not as much as a knight or a rook does, but it's still quite good. And the bishop on g2 has been released and is now aiming across all of the long diagonal. So if rook a8 was later played, perhaps white could do a tactic to win the exchange. very good from white. And here, rook f7 is played. And the reason for this is that I think Tony Miles realised that that the rook on c7 wasn't really going to be going anywhere anytime soon, and he'll try and combat the rook on the 7th by putting his rook on the 7th. So it's an interesting idea. Rook d1, so getting white, getting black's knight to vacate the very good d4 square, and pushing black's pieces back, as well as putting his rook on the same line as black's queen and influencing the semi-open d-file. Knight e6 to attack the rook, and rook a7. Don't retreat the rook, keep it on the 7th, keep it pressurizing the enemy position. And due to white's excellent knight, black can't play anything like rook a8. Queen b6 is prevented by the knight, but rook a8 is prevented by the bishop, because if rook a8, just to briefly show position, white could take, black could take, and now knight takes e7 check, rook takes, and unfortunately black's queen has to say bye-bye. And here I would resign as black in this position. So going back, the move that was played was perhaps not the best on the board. I would have played rook c8 to try and improve my pieces, but again, white can get a very nice position with queen h4 and perhaps king g7 to stop white's queen coming back to h6. But after takes, queen takes, I feel that white's pieces are still better, so I would take white in this position, but perhaps it is better than the game continuation. Instead of rook c8, black played knight f8. So I think here the idea is to vacate the e6 square for his pawn on e7 at maybe a later date, but first perhaps play bishop e6 and take the knight on d5, and then be able to play e6, and that would allow the rook on f7 to challenge the white rook on a7, and perhaps be able to play e6 and d5, which would give him a rather nice protected passed pawn, because white has sacrificed a pawn to get this rather good position here. But queen h4 is played, so targeting e7. So bishop e6 would be a bad move, as white could take on e7. King g7 is played, and knight c7. So white's infiltrating even more by putting his knight on the 7th, and perhaps e6 is on the cards, or maybe even e takes d6, trying to win the pawn back. Rook c8, takes, queen takes. So we get a similar position to the one I just showed, but with white's pieces even more active and no longer a pawn down. So there's lots of different threats here. Like knight e6 could be played very soon if black played knight e6, white could take and win the exchange. There's also moves like knight e8 to be able to pressurize the position even more. Bishop d5 or bishop c6 can be played due to the multiple pins on the black bishop. So it's very nasty. By the way, bishop c6 can only be played after king g1, just to prevent bishop takes c6 check, which would rather ruin the moment. But again, a very good position for white. So black plays rook c8, and here king g1, again just getting out of any potential checks, and also just avoiding any nasty checkmates as well, if well, not checkmates, but losing a piece, to say rook c1 check, and then the only way out of check would be to play bishop f1, and you'd lose the bishop. So king g1 is also useful for that. King h6, so getting his king off the 7th. And now bishop f1. So it's preventing any checks on the first rank, but also attacking b5. And again, this is a horrible position to have, but I might have played bishop e6, and I would lose the pawn, but perhaps I could manufacture something here. It's still a horrible position, but maybe because my rook is behind the b4 pawn, I could perhaps still be able to draw this, although my hopes aren't very high. Going back, perhaps the better move in the game was rook e7, but I really don't like it because of knight d5. So again, that pin on the d7 bishop is still active, and maybe the best plan is just rook g7, trying to minimize the damage here. But instead, rook e1 is played, going on to the attack, knight b6, and here I feel that if I was black, I would just go all out and go up in flames with rook c to c1. Now after knight takes d7, rook takes check, king g1, and I'm kind of forced to play knight takes knight, rook d takes knight, and here, even though the position is symmetrical, because white has the two rooks on the 7th rather than the 8th, he has a killer threat of rook takes h7 checkmate. Rook g1, and just to make the position even more symmetrical, king h3. And black doesn't really have any defense. The only moves he has are just delaying moves. If g5 was played, can you see the best move on the board for white? Yeah, when I say the best move, I really do mean it. Rook a6 isn't quite as good as rook d6, because it checkmates one move sooner. If rook a6, black could delay with rook c6. So check, king h5, and rook takes h7 mate. So yeah, white would win that, but perhaps it would be less painful than what happened. Here, black actually played rook c6, trying to exchange off. And white played a lovely move here. What do you think white played in this position? Well, a lot of moves do win, but this one I think is the most effective. Knight takes bishop, rook takes rook, and knight takes knight. So white has two pieces for the exchange, and there's also, again, the killer threat of rook takes h7 checkmate. So king h5, rook takes h7, king g4. And now this is sort of in the early endgame stage, but the game finished here rather abruptly. What do you think John Nunn played here to threaten checkmate? Okay, 10 more seconds. He played king f2. So the threat is bishop h3 checkmate, or just h3 checkmate, or rook h4 checkmate. So three different checkmates all threatened, and black didn't really have any choice but to play rook takes bishop, king takes, and king f3. Now there is the threat of rook d1, but white met that very well with rook d7, rook c6, and after rook d3 check, king e4, king e2. Miles resigned here because he is just completely lost, being a knight and a pawn down. But I thought this middle game was very sort of instructive of how to pressurize and sort of combine your forces to exploit weaknesses and create lots of pressure against your opponent, as well as there being lots of tactics, as there usually is in the Sicilian. On a side note, though, going back to the puzzle I just gave you, if you said that knight takes g6 was your move, threatening knight e5 checkmate, then you've actually played a better move than John Nunn. So very well done. Here, if rook takes g6, then king g2, and here there is practically no defense. The best move, I think, is resigns, rather oddly. No, rook h6 is the best move, which delays mate by one move after rook takes h6. There's no defense. If black does anything else, white has h3, rook h4, or bishop e2 checkmate. So the best move after knight takes g6 would be rook d5, and then king f2, takes, king f3. And the only thing different here, which makes this a better move, is white's won a pawn, and after knight e5, when the black king goes to either e3 or e4, white can simply trade off by playing rook d7, and black can't avoid the exchange of rooks. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Comment, like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.